This is the V-Spot, the second part of my interview with Dell, the Patriot Wilkes. Dell, thank you for joining me again.
Well, I appreciate you getting back with me.
That's no problem. One thing I was going to ask you about, because this is a pretty significant match in your WWF run. It was not so much significant, but it's very interesting. Do you remember the WWF's first British pay-per-view, one night only?
Yeah, I worked with, well, at that time, Flash Funk. Prior to that, Too Cold Scorpio. But yeah, we worked together.
Right, and you came out, and the British audience just booed you unmercifully. Very, because American fans kind of get called jingoistic for things, but to me, I've never seen a British wrestler get booed so unmercifully just for doing nothing.
No, I agree with you, and I think some of it probably had to do with the fact that when you draped yourself in the flag like I did, and, you're representing America, and you're in another country like that, and of course you've got a little different crowd. It's a wrestling crowd, and I had some matches with Bulldog and done some stuff with him, and of course at the time he was associated with the Hart Foundation, Owen and Brett, and him, and so I think that probably was one of the reasons it was that way is because of the connection and the angle I was having with Brett, the Hart Foundation, and Bulldog's, part in that as well.
When you had the match, now, I'm assuming they put you with Scorpio because they kind of figured you were going to be booed. Were you told to work the match more heelish, or did they just tell you just go out there and work like you normally do?
No, I wasn't told any particular way to go out there and work. Scorpio, and he had, Flash had worked in Japan before. I don't know that he had worked for Baba, but he had worked in Japan, and our idea was just to go out there and sort of have a babyface match, Japanese style.
Oh.
And, I don't know if you noticed in the beginning of the match, would have a few little spots and jump up and square off and shake hands or, just touch, slap palms or something like that. So it was our intention, me and Flash, to go out there and just sort of put together a Japanese match as if we were working in Japan. Well, you really didn't have a baby face or heel. I didn't know I was going to be received that way until literally I walked through the curtain and walked down the aisle and stepped into the ring, and then it was obvious that, at least in their minds, I was the heel.
Yeah, it's an interesting show. Let me ask you something, because, the main event was Bulldog against Shawn Michaels, and, I'm sure you know about obviously you know about the story that happened with that match, where they changed the finish. Was the atmosphere tense in the locker room that night?
Well, you talking about when they changed the finish on Brett?
No, it was Bulldog and Shawn Michaels at the European pay-per-view is for the European title, and they said,
right.
And Bulldog was supposed to win, and he dedicated the match to his sister. And and they ended up changing the finish.
I wasn't aware of anything that, any tension that night, between those guys or anybody. Maybe I was just clueless, but, the tension was always between Brett and Shawn, but, that particular night, I didn't notice anything out of line prior to the match.
If I go back, you were talked about when you left WCW and you went back to All Japan. Had things changed at All Japan at all since you had left?
No, not a bit. It was still the same kind of business. Mr. Bobble wasn't a man tapped for change. Obviously, a few times during the history of that company, he changed things, or at least the way matches were designed and finishes. But no, during my tenure working with him, there was absolutely nothing that changed. He was pretty consistent, and wasn't in for an awful lot of change. No.
Okay. Now, in one match I saw, you teamed with Kobashi regularly, and one match was you took on Gary Albright and Sabu, and I found it interesting because Sabu's one of my favorite wrestlers. How was he to work with?
Well, he was fun to work with. He was a little different. Obviously, he wasn't good for that style over there. He was good for ECW and stuff like that. He he didn't quite fit in there. As long as he and Van Dam could go out and have matches over there, I think things went better for him. But he didn't fit in with that all Japan style. But it was no problem working with. And if I recall, I had just got back from major tricep surgery. I think thank you. I think my arm was probably bandaged up, if I remember correct. Either I had just torn my tricep or I had just come back from tricep surgery, one of the two. And I was a little limited in what I could do, which, happens when you're trying to work hurt or trying to work shortly after surgery and getting back to work before you probably should have.
All right, let me ask you something, because this is a story that went around. I remember when I heard your shoot interview, you talked about it a bit. When you got injured, you said that Baba would not pay for the surgery, but he would do it for the natives. So he ended up loaning you the money.
Well, what he did was, I went to him and had a meeting with him. And meeting with Baba was like meeting with John Gotti. You never could. I don't know. You had to be. You had to be in a hotel somewhere, and you sort of had to be ushered in to see Baba. And so I went to him and I said, "Look, I've injured myself working for you and your company, and everything was done on a handshake with Baba." And I said, "I know with your top Japanese guys, if they get injured, you take care of them. Not only are they paid, but they're allowed a housing allowance, or you do things for them." And I said, "I'm just as loyal to you as they are, and I'm going to be out an indeterminate number of months." And I said, "I think the loyalty should be reciprocated." And he said, "Well, we don't do that." And I, expressed displeasure and the thoughts about coming back to the States and working where you could get guaranteed money if you got hurt.
Right.
And so he told me what he would do. And he said, I forget how much it was. He said, "I'll advance you that amount." And because I was going to be out several months without pay. And of course, we made good money, and I could have made it, but I just didn't think it was right, knowing that he did it for those guys, but he wouldn't do it for his top Americans. And he said, "What we'll do," and he says, we'll take it out over the course of a number of tours or something like that, but I don't mind doing that. And I said, "Okay, that's fine." Well, I went back, and I finally had the surgery and went back. I went back too soon. The doctor wanted me to take about a year off because of my occupation. He said, "Obviously, if you worked at a desk, you sat behind a computer or a desk," he said, "I wouldn't tell you this, but you don't do that kind of work. You're in a very physical line of work, and you probably take a year before you get back in the ring." Well, I took 5 months. I knew I needed to get back to work, and I wasn't going to wait that long. Well, the first tour back, I was probably 10 days, 2 weeks into it, and I went to drop the headbutt on Misawa, I think it was. And when I did, when I stuck my arm out the plant, the tricep popped again. And so here I was facing another several months out of work. And I went to him and I said, "Look, man, I'm facing the same thing, and I've given of my body and of my health for your company." And he said, "Well, I'll do the same thing that I did before." And while I was at home, he wired the money into my account, and I'm being just as truthful and honest with you. And I know that probably a lot of people didn't like the way I handled my business at the time, but at the time, I did what I thought was best for my family. While I was home, that's when my negotiations started with the WWF. And I signed with them, and I don't think I ever went back, or I may have went back for one tour, knowing that I was going to work for Vince. But, so that's exactly what happened. Being older now, and if I were in the same position, I don't know that I would have done the same thing, but I felt like I had shown allegiance to him by putting my career in jeopardy, which eventually it did cost me my career. That's the injury that ended my career. And it was a reoccurring tricep injury that kept happening while I was working for his company. And so I sacrificed time off my career, and I felt like the least he should have done or could have done was pay me while I was out, while other companies here in the States were willing to do it. And so that's what happened. And listen, I enjoyed working for Mr. Baba. I considered him to be an honorable man, but I thought he was wrong in that situation, and I felt like I did what I had to do that was best for me and my family.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I've had this, I had an argument with somebody about once, and I said I agree with you. I mean, because WWF, they would have paid for injury that occurred on their watch, and I think WCW would have, wouldn't they?
Absolutely, both of them would have, and I know that, and again, I'm not a guy that holds animosity toward anyone. You're entitled to your opinion. You're entitled to the way you see things. We can all look at the same situation and see it differently and interpret it differently. But when Dr. Death, Steve Williams, wrote his book, I saw the part in there where he referred to me in a pretty derogatory way for what I did to Baba. But I can assure you, if Doc had been in my shoes, I'm not so sure that he would have done anything different. God rest his soul. I like Steve, and he's entitled to that opinion that he had of me, but walk a mile in my shoes and then make the comment.
Yeah, and definitely. And I'll tell you, even ECW, back in 1995, when they were not a big promotion, Taz broke his neck there, and they paid him till he was able to work again.
Well, I just think it's the right thing to do, especially in that line of work, and especially in the physical nature of the business, the way it was working for Baba. And when I ultimately shortened my career because of that reoccurring injury that kept happening over there. And I just thought that, hey, I've given tremendous loyalty to you. And I just felt the only right thing to do was pay me while I was out. And he disagreed, but, it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. About when you were in the WWF, how did your final injury occur, the one that caused you to retire?
Well, it did not happen there. It was the second time I had torn my tricep in Japan, and I was trying to work through it. I had some good money left on the table with my contract in Vince, and I wanted to. That's where I wanted to finish my career, but not that way. Well, I just because of the fact that I had torn that tricep a second time. I'm now in my late 30s. The handwriting's sort of on the wall. I can't work out in the gym the way I need to. I can literally look at myself in the mirror. I can look at myself on TV, and I can see that my body's not what it used to be because of the fact that I can't train properly. I can't do the things in the ring that I've done in the past and that I feel I need to be able to do. And also, too, at that time, because of that reoccurring injury and trying to work through it, trying to get back in the ring quicker than I should have after surgeries, trying to put off another surgery, I had, like a lot of guys, developed a horrible addiction to pain medication. And I had a chat with my doctor one day, my physician, my orthopedic surgeon here in Columbia. And he said, man, you can't continue. He said, your body is just not going to hold up. And at that point in time, it was no fun. I couldn't do the things I wanted. Working wasn't fun because of the injury, because of the pain. Obviously, I was wrestling with the addiction as well. And, I just got on speakerphone one day. Well, my surgeon called Vince and said, look, this guy's got a chronic tricep problem, and I don't think he can stay healthy. And so after the conversation with Vince and JR called me on a conference call, and all three of us agreed that if I can't work at the level I feel like I needed to, Vince said, look, man, you need to get healthy. And to Vince's credit, I will tell you that he told me, he said, have the surgery, get healthy, take the amount of time you need to get healthy, and then if you want to come back and work, you're more than welcome. If you want to come back on a limited schedule, he said, I'll work with you, man. But what happened after that surgery, the second surgery to repair a torn tricep, I had a real bad staph infection set up. So a month later, after the second surgery, or maybe 6 weeks later, they had to go back in and operate again because of this staph infection. Well, if you know anything about surgery for staph infection, I've got about an 8-inch scar on the back of my arm. Well, they went back in and cut that back open, cleaned the infection out, and left that incision open. I had an open surgical wound on the back of my arm, and the doctor told me it would take 6 to 9 months to close. It took over 2 years for it to close. So there was no way I could work. I was done.
Oh, one thing I wanted to ask you about is, you know, when around in 99, 2000, probably to even today, Tom Brandy was going around working as the Patriot, like wearing the mask and the gear, and he had told people that he had bought the gimmick from you.
Yeah, I have confronted that issue. That is a lie, an absolute lie. And I never sold Tom Brandy anything. I never talked to Tom Brandy. And you know what's really, to me, disgusting about it is to tell that lie, and secondly, to run around, and I've seen stuff, I've had people send things to me that they bought at shows where Tom worked. And, I mean, he was selling pictures of me. Not him wearing the hood and the tights, but of me. And I just, you know, Tom came over and won tour for us in Japan. He didn't fit in. The different kind of guy. He didn't mesh with that group of guys that worked for Baba, and they made it very known to Baba that they didn't want him back, and Baba didn't have him back. If you couldn't have cohesiveness with the core group of guys, the core group of Gaijins or Americans that worked for Baba, then he'd do away with you. But I hate to do this to you. I've got a customer here at work that I need to get to. If you want to take this up and finish it at a later date, we can do it, but I've got to tend to some business right now. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I appreciate any time you give me.
All right, brother, I'll give you a buzz later, and I'll give you a text, and we'll do it, okay?
All right, thank you. All right, bye-bye. Okay, I am here. I'm going to hopefully finish my talk with Dale the Patriot Wilkes here. He's been very patient with me and been very giving of his time. How are you, Dale?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Basically, last time we were talking, we were talking about Tom Brandy, and he had gotten the Patriot gimmick.
Right.
Right. When did you first find out about that?
I don't know, maybe 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. I found out that, you know, he was running around doing that, and, you know, that's, the way I look at it is, I guess in a way it's flattering that he would do that, because he certainly wouldn't do it if it hadn't been a gimmick that had popularity to it, and the fans liked, and a successful one at that. But if he's that good, why can't he just go as Tom Brandy?
Yeah.
You know, if he's that charismatic, if he's that good in the ring, if he's that good on the mic, if he's all that, then why does he need to go as me? You know, I don't understand that, but I guess that's just, you know, his inadequacies in his career. You know, I think, and I'm not being critical, but I think I'm being truthful. I think basically the extent or the high point of his career was working for ECW. And I know there were a lot of people that liked ECW, but really if you couldn't work for Vince, or you couldn't work for Current, or you couldn't work in Japan, you worked in ECW.
Yeah, I think he was only there, but I don't even think he was there that long. I think he was there in like 94 for a few months.
Yeah, and like I told you in an earlier interview, he came over one tour for us, I think, in Japan, and, you know, that style didn't fit, you know, his ability. And the biggest thing, he didn't fit in with the guys. I mean, he just did not mesh well with the guys, and when you're spending 30 days on the road, in the same bus, in the same dressing room with the same guys, in the same weight room, in the same restaurants, because there you really do pretty much everything together. When you're on the road in the States, you can get a rental car and go your separate way. You don't have to stay where everybody else stays. You don't have to lift where everybody else lifts. You don't have to tan and eat where everybody else does those things. But over there, you pretty much go to war as a group, because you travel on the same bus, you stay at the same hotel. And so being able to get along guys that were full-time workers for Baba, he just couldn't do it. And all those guys expressed the fact that they didn't want him back, and so he was never brought back. So, but it is what it is. You know, if that's what he's got to do to continue to work in front of 250 people at a local high school on weekends, and more power to him.
Yeah, I was thinking if somebody saw him, didn't know that who it was, I'd say, I don't know what, is it me or is the Patriot not as good as he used to be?
Yeah, you know, I'd like for everybody to know that my career was over. I ended it. I didn't need to, I just didn't find it necessary to continue to do that. The way I look at it is, when it's over, it's over. You move on. It was a chapter in my life. I'm in the next chapter of my life, and I worked those venues on my way up. National Guard armories, county fairs, state fairs, you know, pool halls, and high school gymnasiums and stuff like that. I worked enough of those at the beginning of my career. Certainly didn't want to work them at the end of my career.
To go back to All Japan, one of the things in your run that I was watching, you know, on that YouTube channel I showed you, I noticed you had a lot of different partners, and if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you about some of them.
Okay, shoot.
Okay, one match you took on Misawa and Kawada, you teamed up with Richard Slinger, and Richard Slinger's always a guy that I find very interesting because he's an American, but he spent his entire career in Japan. He never worked in the United States, as far as I know.
No, you know, Owen just may be working some outlaw independent shots like that, but he was Terry Gordy's nephew.
Yeah.
And that's how he got the spot over in Japan. And when I first went back to Japan, the first time as the Patriot, in the first couple of tours, I think they were sort of trying to find out what to do with me, who to put with me as a tag team partner when we worked tag matches. I think they were, you know, trying to figure out how best to use me in that way. So I went through some guys like Richard and Johnny Smith and a lot of different guys like that. I think until they, you know, we came up with the idea of putting me and Jackie Fulton together, but went through quite a few partners that, you know, on a short-term basis.
All right. You worked with a guy named Sonny Beach in a match with Stan Hansen and Johnny Ace, and the funny thing about the match is that Stan Hansen was working as a face in peril. You know, like he was getting beat down by you guys almost most of the match, and Johnny Ace came in and kind of saved him.
Yeah, well, you know, that was, I don't know, sometimes it was just, Stan could be, not temperamental, but just depending on what he wanted to do that particular night. But, you know, I think, if I'm correct, maybe July of '92 may have been about the only time I tagged with Sonny. He came and did just a very limited number of tours for us. And again, I don't think what he was capable of doing in the ring or able to do in the ring really fit the All Japan style. So they didn't bring me back many times after that. But I think it was just briefly there in the summer of '92, maybe '93, that we tagged together a few times.
Another guy, and this is a guy that's kind of a big deal to me just because he doesn't pop up too much, was Billy Black. He was a guy that I've followed for a long time because I've saw him off and on. Like, he appeared in ECW once or twice, and he seemed really talented, you know, because he did stuff that didn't really go with his look. And I know he did All Japan, but he never really made it, and that's surprising because it seems like he should have at least gotten a run in ECW or something.
Well, and Billy was talented, and you're right, he did not have the look. You know, he was allergic to the weight room, to the gym, and so, you know, from a physique, but athletic ability, the ability to do certain things that other guys couldn't do, you know, could put some great spots together. But still, there's only, working for Baba back then, really there was only so much he was going to do with smaller guys, and I know Billy wasn't a tiny guy, but he wasn't a very big guy either. You know, there was only so much work you were going to get from Baba. So Billy worked again. Him and Joel Deaton. Joel got him booked over there. Joel had worked for Baba for a good while and was the crowd favorite in Japan. And so Joel was influential in getting Billy booked there. But now, as to why Billy didn't have a better run here in the States when he was with ECW, I'm not sure, because it seems to me that his style would have fit that, or at least somewhat, fit a lot of the things they were doing. I could imagine him and Sabu, him and Van Dam having some good matches.
Yeah, he had one match with Sabu, and I think he only worked 2 ECW matches, and that's what I was wondering. And I don't know if you've heard the stories. I remember there was a news story in 1999 where he beat up a promoter at a show.
Oh, Black did?
Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard that. It was in Georgia.
No, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, it was like I don't want to be quoted on, but I do remember seeing it it was a little item in a newspaper. Because he had pistol whipped the promoter or something.
Well, that has a way of, when you pistol whip a promoter, of putting an end to your career, people wanting to book you, I would imagine.
Yeah, do you think, was there anything in his personality that would have caused him to have made it in the States more?
No, not that I can recall. I mean, I thought, Bill had a pretty good attitude, was easy to work with, and,
okay, yeah.
I didn't notice anything.
Yeah, okay, that's, because I've just been curious, because, I've watched a lot of his matches, and he's kind of like my, as fans, sometimes, we pick these wrestlers that are almost lost wrestlers, because they didn't really get a big enough run, so whenever you find new footage of them, it's always really exciting.
Sure, I understand.
Eventually, research with Eagle are now turning up online.
Right.
And I didn't realize that you would want to tag in All Japan with him.
Yeah, we did.
Now, how was that for you to finally get a title in All Japan?
Well, we were excited about it because the belt they put on us, I think it was the All Asian. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Kabashi and Kikuchi had that belt. Of course, Furnace and Crawford had that belt, and some very good tag teams. And guys that were great workers over there and had a long career over there. So we looked at it as something that was, very favorable, something that was good for us. And and I can't remember. You may know, so maybe you can help me. I don't know who we worked with when we got it. Was it Kabashi and Kikuchi or Can-Am?
I feel like it was Kobashi and Kikuchi, and you lost it to the Can-Ams.
Okay, all right, and you may be right.
Yeah, I don't have my computer on, so I can't really check at the moment.
But yeah, in those years there, we had a lot of good matches with Kabashi and Kikuchi and with Can-Am, and of course then Kabashi was elevated to the next level, and then he starts working more with Hansen and Doc and Masawa and Taue and Kawada. And then, for whatever reason, they sort of separated Jackie and I, and then I started working with Ace, and he with Kabashi, and so, we just sort of moved to the next level. But, those times working with those guys and working for that belt and around that belt, had a lot of good matches, a lot of fun.
How were the Can-Ams to work with?
Great. The best friend I ever had in that business was Doug. I was the best man in Doug's wedding when he got married a second time. And Doug was my closest friend. We were like brothers. I mean, every night on the road over there, either he ate in my room, I ate in his room, or we were together. It was almost like a married couple. So Doug and I were very close, and Doug was a professional. Doug was a great dude, and the best athlete that I have ever been around in my life. He was phenomenal. He was big, strong, fast, quick. And he could do things to you that I would not let anybody else do to me in a ring, because Doug had that kind of strength and power to pull it off. And then, of course, you had Phil's creativity. Danny Crawford, that Phil LaFon's his real name, and then you had his creativity in the ring, and also sort of that comedy side of him from time to time when he was in that kind of mood. So, listen, man, any night that we could work with those guys, I knew it was going to be a good night and a good match.
Actually, let me ask you about this, because in 1997, when you got to the WWF, they were there, and for some reason, they could not really, because I watched their Japan matches, and I saw, and even in their ECW matches, they showed a lot of charisma and personality in their work. For some reason, when they got to WWF, it seemed like that all went away.
Well, and you know, listen, there's a lot of factors that happen. And I mean, I even experienced that. When you get there, there are so many people that can affect your career. You know, you've got a room full of guys that are basically a committee that are deciding who's working who and what angle they're in, and if they're getting the push or not getting the push. And you may have 2 or 3 guys in your corner, but then you may have 4 or 5 that's not. Or you may have, you know, somebody with a lot of stroke that's not in your corner, and the rest of the crowd can't convince them otherwise. And so, I don't know why. Because obviously, their in-the-ring ability was phenomenal. The matches that they had in Japan, ECW, were great. I believe that they had shown good charisma. So I really can't put my finger on why it didn't happen in WWF.
Yeah, it was strange because their debut match at Survivor Series, they were really over. It was a great match. They had a couple of great matches with Owen and Bulldog, but it seemed like the personality they'd had in ECW and Japan, it just seemed like it had went away. And it felt like with Doug Furness, even when he went back to ECW, it was like that WWF run had changed him.
Right.
As a performer, and I can't really, and again, I'm not a wrestler or anything, so I can't really, you know, I'm just saying this as a viewer.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and again, I really don't have any insight as to why that happened or what went on with it. You know, Doug and I, through all the discussions and late night phone calls and things of that nature, really never discussed it. Doug was another guy that, like me, when it was time to move on, moved on.
Yeah, and I mean, he was an amazing talent. I still like he had this match with Rob Van Dam in ECW, which is one of my favorite ECW matches ever, because it was just, I mean, he just came across like a superstar. He had it all.
Yeah, Doug and I had a couple of single matches over in Japan that were very good, and again, I'm very biased and very opinionated when it comes to Doug. There wasn't, as far as a human being and just a good quality individual, there wasn't anybody any better that I've ever been across in my life. Doug, miss him, think about him a lot, and just a tremendous friend, good guy.
Were any of those matches taped?
I think we did it during one of the single tours. I think we did have a TV match, and between Doug and I feel pretty sure at least one of them was taped.
You mentioned that you were the last AWA Tag Team Champion. I was wondering, do you still have the belt?
No. Those belts were left with them.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I was curious because, some guys I know, I remember when ECW closed that Rhino ended up with both belts that he had. He still had them. They never asked for them back or anything.
Right. Yeah, they asked for theirs back, so I gave them back.
Do you watch it? Have you watched any wrestling since you left?
Oh, yeah. Now, I don't watch much of it now. I don't know anybody that works now. And, I think Taker works once a year. And really, to my knowledge, that's the only guy that I work with that still gets in the ring that I can watch on TV. There may be some of those guys over in, what's that other group?
TNA.
TNA. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's anybody there that I work with. So, matter of fact, I turned over to their show last night and watched about 5 minutes of it. There's still a desire to watch if I see a good match.
Yeah.
But it's gotten, I don't know, it's gotten so...
it's a bit talky.
It's sitcom-like.
Yeah, the thing is, because when I went to a TNA taping, and they would have these long promo segments, and I'll tell you, nobody wanted to watch it. People were there, they wanted to see wrestling. They really wanted to see some action.
Right.
And I'm telling you, and people always say that people won't talk, they really don't, because I'll tell you, people there, we were just, there was this one promo segment, and I actually saw myself in the background looking at my cell phone.
Yeah, that's not good. When I turned over last night to watch TNA, they were promoting or pushing a match that was going to be coming up later in the show, and then they went to a vignette where a guy was out in the woods and some dude was dressed up like a kangaroo or something, and he had a walking stick and spoke in a Australian accent, and I thought, what in the world has this got to do with wrestling? I have no desire. If I want to watch something this stupid, I'll go to MTV. You know? So I spent about 3 minutes watching.
WWE has longer matches now because they have so much TV time to fill up, and I think that it finally occurred to them about a year or two ago just to have matches.
Well, and they do. They've got some guys up there that have good matches and work well together. So, obviously, you know, if I do watch anything, the majority of the time it'll be with them. But I'll probably spend more time watching old videos and DVDs from when I worked and even before. You know, I find that much more entertaining.
That's kind of how I am. I mean, I still watch current stuff, but I mainly like watching old tapes or DVDs. One thing I was curious about to talk to you about, I noticed when we mentioned Ric Flair, you know, you sounded almost kind of disappointed. I was wondering, because you probably grew up watching Ric Flair in the Carolinas.
Yeah, I did.
Were there any guys you grew up watching that you were very disappointed to meet them? That they didn't live up to what you might have imagined?
No, I can't say that. Not that I was disappointed in. They may not have been exactly what I expected them to be personality-wise, but then what I saw on TV, growing up or as a teenager, obviously is going to be a little different than what you're around when you're, you know, just backstage talking with the boys.
Yeah.
And, you know, I guess the one that probably more than lived up to, and as I do with Doug Furnace, I have a very, I don't know, special place in my heart, and very, I never imagined, and I grew up watching Wire, and just thought an awful lot of it.
Doing these shows I've done, I've been very grateful that every wrestler I've encountered turned out to be a very good
Star, man. They're professional wrestlers, but they're just normal people. They have normal issues and normal good days and days just like anybody else. So most of the guys are really good guys.
Yeah, and I always find that a lot of the wrestlers, they're so professional. Like, you know, you were like this. I have a call-off, you know, people that'll, like, if you're, like, if you say you're going to talk to me, you always get to me about 5 minutes beforehand. Or, like, you know, right on, like these old-school wrestlers, it's right on schedule.
Yeah.
Something, you don't really encounter it too much now.
No, and I was fortunate that in the early part of my career, I was able to be around those guys and be influenced by those guys and look up to those guys and learn from them.
Is there anybody you still talk to that's in wrestling?
You know, not like with Vince or I mean, like I told you the other day, I talked to Bagwell, I talked to Nikita, I talked to Lex, occasionally talked to Horowitz, Nasty Boys, but Nord, but nobody that's still outside of Bagwell. I guess he works independent shows, but nobody that works for, you know, TNA or Vince, no.
All right, well, Dale, thank you very much for talking to me. I really appreciate it.
Glad to do it, man. Thank you.